Good morning and welcome. Welcome to several people and welcome back to a number of people. Welcome to the Zoom version of Stone Creek Zen Center. Thank you for being here to everyone. Just to give a little orientation. So we sit from 10 to 10:30. So if you come in the middle of that, that can be a little confusing. And then we'll ring the bell and we'll do the opening chant, which you can find in the chat if you don't know it. And so let's do that. We'll do the chant together and then I'll introduce this morning's speaker. The profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered, even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. So good morning, and again, welcome to everyone. This morning we have for me, the great joy of welcoming a sibling, Joan Amaral. Joan is joining us from Massachusetts. So she's in her midday out there. And Joan, like Leanne, is a Dharma sibling from Tassajara. We lived together there over a number of years, mostly at Tassajara, thanks to, and different parts of San Francisco Zen Center. For a number of years, I've had the great joy of joining Joan and her sangha when I visit my family in Massachusetts, and we've been scheming like how to get her join at Stone Creek and have encounter our sangha and be able to teach here and meet all of you. And so the pandemic provides us with that possibility. So a number of months ago, we asked Joan if she would come and give a talk in June, and it was a long way off when we first imagined it. And now here it is. And Joan is the founding teacher of the Zen Center of the North Shore. For those who are from Massachusetts, it's also known as the Zen Center of the North Shore. And it, which formerly was the Marblehead Zen Center. And yeah, I'm just delighted. I actually had this sensation, Joan, when there's only a few of us here in the beginning, of like really feeling like, oh, finally Joan's here with us in this strange way. So please welcome Joan, and thank you so much for being here this morning.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. If you can hear me, could you just give me a thumbs up? Whoa, it's a lot of thumbs up. So I also feel very small. You know, this is such a wonderful sangha. We've got like 40 people here, and the more people who come in, I feel like I'm receding. But I'm assuming you can see me, you can hear me. I'm so happy to be here. Jisho, where did Jisho go? Is she oh, hi, Jisho. We haven't met, but I just want to say what a delight it is to be here with you and your sangha. You're a bit of a rock star in my world. So thank you. And Charlie and Sarah, it's really good to see you. Thank you so much. I have so much love and affection and admiration and respect for you. Really, really happy to be here. And I think there are a few other people here who I know, but I'm not going to go into naming you. I'm just really happy to see you. I have to tell you what's happening here in Massachusetts. I don't know if you can hear, it's actually very beautiful. We had our morning sit this morning that ended at, let's see, it would have been 6:30 a.m. your time. So it was a beautiful day, and I just had time enough to walk down to the beach and have a swim. And now it's pouring rain out there. And it's getting darker and darker, and I'm having some difficulty seeing my notes. We'll just see what happens. But I want you to know what's happening here. It is a beautiful rain. Right outside my window are these deciduous trees that are very green. They're very happy, I'm sure, right now because we needed rain. And my neighbor has just decided to start his motorcycle. This is our life. And Zoom, very unpredictable, perfect for practice, meeting the moment. So I do want to share that, it's so interesting. This talk, if it needs to have a name, we could name it something like disrupting the status quo, something like that. I think that's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about, sharing with you this morning. Disrupting the status quo. So we had our schedule. I put my robes on. I took my robes off, got into a bathing suit, went down to the beach, was with other people in my beachside city of Beverly. And, it was a beautiful day. The water was just perfect. I heard the people next to me say, wow, this is really nice here, isn't it? There's free parking. There were no sharks this year. We don't seem to have a shark problem. Instead, we've had a lion's mane jellyfish problem, but we didn't see any jellyfish today. It was kind of a perfect day. And there I was in between two dharmic situations, knowing I was going to offer a talk with you now, having just offered a talk to my own Sangha this morning. And so it was kind of an unusual couple of hours there, being sandwiched between Dharma and just feeling human life. And I just want you to know that what I felt was my aloneness. I felt kind of mystified. What is it to be alive? What is it to be a human being in these extraordinary times of pandemic and protest? It might be easy for us to feel unmoored, and we are so lucky to have this practice, to have this place to return to, our cushion, our chair, our seat of awakening. And I'm just really grateful for that. This disrupting the status quo, that famous Zen story, maybe of it's soji time, it's temple cleaning time. Remember that? When we had soji together, when we had a physical practice place together. And there's a monk outside who's sweeping. And sweeping, and then that sound of sweeping a pebble into a bamboo stalk. And I think about that, of disrupting the status quo. The status quo of sweep, and then something happens and it's, oh, here I am. That's how I see that story, as disrupting the status quo. And that's how I felt my experience this morning. Disrupting the status quo of falling into, illusions of aloneness, of loneliness even. Sinking mind of confusion. And, I've been involved in some kind of less subtle events of disrupting the status quo. in the last period of time that I just want to share with you. And I offer these stories within this thought. It is an offering that any of these other processes in human life that are sometimes called issues, like racism, the issue of racism, or the issue of climate collapse, climate catastrophe, or for some of us who may still be saying climate change. That these are all activities I'm about to share of disrupting the status quo. And there's a way in which this pandemic we're in is disrupting the status quo. Of course, it's clear that we can't go on business as usual. And maybe like some of you, I feel very strongly that if we return to what our life was like before the pandemic, then we've missed a really incredible opportunity to massively disrupt a status quo that was not working anyway for so many of us. So one of the stories is this really beautiful scene. I want to set this scene. So I was trained as a dancer, a modern dancer, out there in San Francisco, and that's how I ended up at San Francisco Zen Center, and then met Sarah and Charlie. And so I feel that experience of having been a dancer, a modern dancer, was a really wonderful setup for entering Zen practice. I'm talking about the physicality of Zazen, what we just did, being in the body. People ask me, do you miss dancing? And I say, no, I'm still dancing. It just looks like this. My mudra, my posture, so-called stillness. And in fact, it's so much closer to dance, Zazen, than when I was actually dancing. Just because when I was dancing, it was so easy to fall into things like performance and production and presentation. And I felt so far removed from the actual joy of the dance itself, of the embodied experience of dancing. And so there's that, there's the practice of Zazen, of being in the body. And then there's also this ritual that, maybe is altered quite a bit in this age of Zoom. But as you can see behind me, I'm still really, I'm still bringing in elements of ritual because I find them so helpful. They're so powerful. They capture my imagination and make sure that I'm not going to stray. I'm going to stay right here. So one of these events I want to describe was last summer at Good Harbor Beach. I think maybe all of you, do you by now know Extinction Rebellion? When I was at Tassajara last summer, there were several people I was surprised who hadn't heard of Extinction Rebellion at that point yet. But I think maybe, it started in Europe, maybe New York. Anyway, it was really big on the East Coast. And I think by now it's really made its way across the globe. So imagine this if you've ever been in New England. I say we work hard for our beautiful beach days. We earned our summer with the snow and, the cold weather. And so it was a glorious beach day last, I think it was August. It couldn't have been more beautiful. It was just like this morning was. The sky was blue, the ocean was blue. There was this beautiful expanse of white sanded beach. It's in Gloucester, Good Harbor Beach. And it was packed. So many people that day. This was last summer. And people playing volleyball. You could hear people's music, you know. People, it was a Sunday. People were relaxing, having a nice time in the human realm. Children playing. And in we came, a funeral procession. Extinction Rebellion had organized a funeral procession for the earth. And we were all dressed in black. I was wearing these robes. I was carrying a bell. Some people were carrying coffins. There were some people on drums. There were, I don't know, scores of us, 80, 90, maybe 100 of us, walking maybe 2 or 3 or so across in a column, this somber column through that crowded beach on that gorgeous day. And it was so powerful to enter that beach and see what happened. You know, it reminds me of the Parinirvana Sutra in a way, of when the Buddha died. Do you remember this? Do you offer this ceremony? It's so moving to me. I can never recite this without crying. The leaves turn just a little bit. The foxes slowed down in their loping. The children turned in their beds in wonder. That's what I felt walking onto that beach. And I was trembling inside. It was awesome. I was awestruck by what we were doing. That was a major disruption of the status quo. And it can get kind of confusing, you know, to see like mothers like grab onto their children and pull them closer. Some people were scared. You know, what's going to happen here? What are these people going to do? And I did feel within myself some concern, but mostly I felt determination. The second image is at the Nairobi Embassy, Kenya, with my friend Esther. And Esther has given me permission to talk freely about her. This is part of our pact. She's Kenyan, very dark. She looks Kenyan. And I'm pretty white. And we've made a pact that we're going to deploy my white privilege wherever we can. And so we did this at the Nairobi Embassy a few months ago to try to, I will say, rescue her husband from the violence of political systems that keep families apart in so many different ways. And so, and I could see I'm going to run out of time here. Esther and I showed up at the embassy using that word, determination. We didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know what was going to happen. I put my robes on. She put her best dress on. And we showed up. And she says it's because of my whiteness that we were able to get as far into the embassy as we did. Before we were asked to leave. And as we were escorted out on our own, we opened the door to go outside. And then I said, no, Esther, we need to go back in there. And she said, well, it's that's, what's going to happen. And I said, well, what we're doing is disrupting the status quo. We were afraid. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we turned around and we walked back in. And pretty soon the Marines came with their guns, and there we are in the lobby. And, my first impulse was to sit down, to take my shoes off and to sit down and to start meditating. This is scary, to disrupt the status quo. This is scary to go against the grain, but I'm proposing to you that this is exactly our practice as bodhisattvas. This is what we're doing all the time. And there's 40 of us here. I have no idea. Maybe all of you are going, yeah, we know that. But maybe there's some of you who don't see that yet. How can I give a Dharma talk these days without invoking what's happening? And to see it as not what's happening to someone else, but what's happening to me. There's something extraordinary happening in the streets right now, and I know your Sangha is part of this. I know you were out the other day with your signs. This is wonderful. And it's not a blip, at least so far. George Floyd died, was it May 27th, and here we are, June 28th. It's nearly a month, and this is still happening. Let this continue until we see tangible change. I want to say to any of us here who identify as white, I think the single most challenging or the single most powerful enemy for us, is a sense of overwhelm. I think that sense of overwhelm comes when I personally think that, oh, this is something extra I have to do now, as opposed to just a slight shift in my awareness and my attention. That just as if I were walking down the street and someone, walking by me or across the street said, help, what would I do? Would I just keep walking? There are so many people saying help right now. There are so many beings saying help right now. Are we hearing these cries? So behind me, this is my backup. These are beings who I really appreciate sitting with. I need them. I want to keep them close. You can see there's the Buddha. Yep, we got the Buddha there. We also have Kuan Yin, and we have Manjushri. So I want to just point out, maybe you know this, but I think it's interesting that wisdom, Manjushri, and compassion, Kuan Yin, need each other. If you just have wisdom without compassion, it's might be too detached. We might not feel enough. We might not feel it as our own cries. We see it as someone else's cries across the country. We don't see them as immediate. We don't feel them. And then if we have compassion without wisdom, we might fall into sentimentality. We might get lost in trying to help and maybe causing more harm. So we're so lucky that we have both of these beings. Very grateful. And I want to just mention for anyone who's stressed out by my talk right now, what I'm asking you to do. If you're feeling like it, take to the streets. Yeah, do it. If you're feeling like it, pick up the phone and make a few phone calls to your Congress people. Do it. But whatever you do it like Kuan Yin. I don't know if you can see her. Check her out. You might have her in your own home. She is sitting in the posture of royal ease. Okay? You know what it is. She's open. She is open and she's relaxed. Her shoulders are not up to here. Even though she's the regarder of the cries of the world, she's the hearer, the perceiver of the cries of the world. Is she stressed out? No. Her brow is smooth, you know, and it's interesting in this posture of royal ease. I think that foot is actually touching the earth. I think she's getting ready to stand up and do something. She's getting ready to stand up. It's the Dharma of the second bell. The first bell is we sit down and we connect with our own pain. It's very important. It's when we do that, it's what saves us from perpetuating more othering, you know, trying to help those poor people out there. We start with the poor person right here. And we connect this poor person with all poor people. It's the great ground leveler. That's the Dharma of the first bell, I think. The Dharma of the second bell is, okay, I've done that. Now let me connect. How is the question? And for the 40 rectangles we've got here, we've got 40 hows. That's up to you. You get to decide. I wanted to say, you know, before I finish in a minute or two, I just want to make sure I say the word vulnerable. Because this morning I was sharing a section of Zen Mind Beginner's Mind with my Sangha, with Suzuki Roshi talking about Buddhism not being a philosophy. And I think most of us here on the screen, gathered here right now, might say, yeah, no, Buddhism's not a philosophy, it's a practice. Look, here we are, we're practicing together. We've sat zazen, we've done some chanting, and now we're sharing a Dharma talk. It's not a philosophy for us, we're practicing. But I just want to say to you, venerable practitioners of the way, AKA POWs, that practicing the Buddha Dharma might still be a little bit too tidy. I think what we're doing is diving ass over tea kettle into our vulnerability with each other, into the truth of our vulnerability, and trying to find a way to handle it. There is no time like now for us to realize viscerally how vulnerable we are. We don't know where this is going, this pandemic, do we? So I'm very grateful to be here with you in the truth of vulnerability and make this inquiry. I know Charlie's talking about inquiry these days. All of this, you know, really this Dharma talk in some ways is just a cry for help, crying out to you to make this inquiry with me, to continue to refine what is our practice and how is it not separate from everything and everyone everywhere, that nothing is an issue, actually. It's all ours. I hang out with a lot of Baptist ministers these days, and sometimes I feel like a Baptist minister. Okay, so I don't know, does that give you enough sense of where I'm coming from and what you might want to share with me to give me a sense of where you are today? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being.
If you have a question or a comment or an inquiry of any kind, just unmute and we can, yeah, you can, if you kind of want to get in line, you can unmute and we can see who's waiting to to say something with Joan.
This is my favorite part, actually. Some people might feel this is socially awkward. I just want you to know what I've started doing. It's lovely because no one can, you can't tell who I'm looking at. So I'm actually gazing with great affection, unabashedly, not concerned with societal norms. You're not supposed to stare. I'm drinking you in.
I guess I would just like to say that I liked your talk a lot, but particularly when you said at the end to tumble into vulnerability, to let the rug being pulled out from under us by this pandemic, to use that occasion. And you say, well, how do we make it an opportunity? By letting ourselves tumble, as you said, into vulnerability. I like that very much, so thank you.
You know, I just want to, if I could just add something to that, and then Jude, yes, this tumbling in. I learned so much coming out of the monastery and establishing a. Bonita Macaro, to this day, I remember for her, when we offer the full bows and we raise our palms, she would say that she would tumble into the zendo every morning. She had so much going on in her life. And when we offer the bows and she palms, this means, here, Buddha, you take all this stuff. I'm tired of carrying it around. So beautiful. But yes, what did you want to say?
Should I go ahead? That was a wonderful talk. And it's really nice knowing to me that you're on the East Coast, just because it feels like the breadth of action. I feel like it's like a big giant paintbrush across this map of the globe, that there are people everywhere. And it's, for me, it's a source of tremendous comfort, and I take a lot of strength from that. So I just feel like this is exactly what I need to hear. And I just appreciate the articulateness of being able to channel the energy and the source of what you're calling disrupting the status quo for us. And it was a very accessible, wonderful, useful, helpful talk. And I really loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan. I love the companionship of wisdom and compassion, and they're hand in hand. And then I like your wonderful disruption of Kuan Yin touching the ground and being about to jump up. You know, that we can take our practice into our imagination and into our spontaneity and action. Thank you very much.
Elizabeth, thank you. I think creativity has so much to do with this. When I think of Sebastopol, I think of creative people. You're in such a wonderful place for practicing creativity, or just allowing creativity.
Joan?
Yes.
Hi. I'm Peggy Denial.
Oh, hi, Peggy. Yes, you're one of the people I know. Two people. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Joan.
So my question is, you know, I'm overwhelmed as everyone else. And I've learned that I can take on things, but it seems I can take on a small, not necessarily a small thing. I can take on a big thing, but I can take on one person. I can help one person.
Mhm.
I'm not so good at taking on the whole of climate or the whole of racism. I can help one child, or I can help my brother, or and that seems so small. And I don't know how to make it. And I see all the rest. I mean, I don't know what to do.
I have an idea. 3 words, Peggy. Break it down. I mean, that one, you say it doesn't seem like much, but it's a lot to that person you're helping. Did you say your brother? So I mentioned Esther. At times when I get overwhelmed, it's very helpful for me to just come back to the actual relationships I have with the people who are actually in my life. And it is a great blessing, I want to say, that a person of color, a Black woman with an accent, she's got 3 marks against her in this country, trusts me enough to let me into her life. So when it gets overwhelming, I think about Esther. How can I be there for Esther? It's so helpful. And actually it keeps it real too, because it's not me and my good intentions and the thoughts that I have of how I can be helpful. It's actually just returning to the relationship. So this is another thing, Peggy, thank you for bringing this up. The question that I have in this work of a bodhisattva is, where do I return to? To what do I return? Yes, we're Zazen people, so we return to the cushion. So what does that mean? For me, it's about returning to relationship, returning to the relationship with my own body mind as a basis for returning to relationship with the so-called other. So I don't think we should ever be concerned about not enough, especially if it's gonna paralyze us into nothing. As this Black woman said recently here in our city, whatever you do, don't do nothing. Overwhelm is a privilege. Peggy, thank you for asking that. Thank you for sharing that. I hope that is a response that's helpful to you.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan, for your talk. I appreciate what you said. And obviously in this Sangha, by looking at the screen, we're all mostly white people. And I have, in this process, I've been looking at white privilege and the many generations in this country, going back to the very beginning, and how we took the land and how we brought people. It's like for many years I never even felt it, because it just becomes normal, Anyway, I somehow, an aspect of white privilege, which you alluded to, is you can just get a shell of a privilege of not feeling what other people are going through and what the effect of white privilege is. I've really appreciated how our Sangha has had a focus on climate and racism, and I began looking at what I could do, and I've been working a little bit with some homeless people in Santa Rosa, and I realized in the beginning I was just afraid of talking to them. I was afraid that they wouldn't like me, or that, you know, person of privilege, they'd want to kill me or something. And, you know, so I began extending myself to them, and obviously found a huge variety of circumstances and, you know, health issues and so on. And it's kind of like what you alluded to with your friend saying that just do something. And that's a precious, precious bit of action, is just to do something. So thank you for bringing this up.
You're welcome. Is it Tomas?
Yeah.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you so much. There's so much to say on that. But the most important thing I want to say, the most important thing that you said, Tomas, was not with words. You know, and I want to name it. I think you were crying. Thank you so much for that. I think when we talk about opening, I think this is it. This is what shifts the energy. I rarely these days can get through a Dharma talk without crying. I think I was just daunted by all of you, that it just didn't come up. I think I was just, you know, I don't know what that was, but, you know, I think as white people, I think it's really important that we just start feeling. And I do believe that this is our actual practice. When we sit down, we open to what's actually happening here, right here. Like, what am I feeling? What's arising, you know? And I root my tailbone and I extend out from that rootedness. So with that posture in place, I can really let it rip. It's okay. You know, I'm not going to be blown away. I'm not going to be unmoored. I'm going to stay right here. So just quickly, and then maybe someone else would like to say something. I just want to share what happened in a meeting recently here in our city. Esther and I, you know, we're a team, and we've had this idea. Okay, well, what if Beverly, our city, had a department of racial justice, equity, and inclusion? So we've been talking about this. Then when George Floyd got killed, all the white people in Beverly started calling Esther, the mayor, the city council. Esther, help us. You know, what do we need to do? Because, you know, how do we respond to this? So Esther and I went in for the jugular. We said, okay, you want help? We're here to help. And so we had a meeting with the mayor and 2 city council people, and the head of the Human Rights Committee. And Esther, at a certain point, was talking about how we were trying to get her husband out of Kenya. And there's a reason Esther's here in this country, why she sought asylum. She's got massive trauma, PTSD. She can't sleep at night. She can only get to sleep when the sun rises. Her life is very difficult, and she lives alone with her husband, you know, an ocean away and a continent away. But Esther was describing how what she and I do is she uses my white privilege, but without her Black experience, I wouldn't know what to do. So we combine that. And as Esther was telling the story, one of the city council people started crying on the Zoom screen. And I could see them crying. And the mayor was right there. And I named it, not to it's not about shaming. I mean, we were all feeling it. It's more about, yes, this is the appropriate response, Tomas. This is the appropriate response. That is a beautiful and authentic basis for beginning any kind of justice work that's sustainable. So, and so I named that with a city council person, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but after that, there was nothing that the mayor said no to. Including $200,000 allocated for this office. So, you know, that kind of response from the heart, it's a kind of kind speech, I think, that can change the course of the nation, as Dogen says. Okay, does anybody else want to say anything? I know our time is going, but I'd really love to hear from anybody else who'd like to speak. I'm scanning.
I'd like to say a quick thing if there.
Please.
And well, I see Barry too. I'll be quick. I just Thank you so much, Joan.
Mhm.
And I love the articulation of like, there's the subtleness of the bamboo going pop, you know, and then there's maybe less subtle things. But I wonder if you could just briefly say what the relationship between engaging both of those are, you know, those subtle, like you being at the beach and feeling the fullness of your human experience today, how that has everything to do with engaging with Extinction Rebellion or sitting in the embassy in Nairobi, you know, like that, these subtle things and more obvious things did.
Yeah.
And intertwined.
What was that last thing?
And intertwined, you know,
Yes.
and create each other.
Well, let me see here if this, I've written a few notes here since we've been talking, and I think I really wanted to share my feelings on the beach this morning of vulnerability, of my loneliness. I was wondering, what is my life? You know, what am I doing? It's like I'm a white person who does not feel in control. And that's a good thing. We need more of that. I feel that that's the courage of me, Joan, today. I wanted to share that with you, that I felt like a schlump on the beach. I've gained 10 pounds since the pandemic, you know, and, you know, as a priest, it's like Sarah and I went swimming when Sarah was visiting, and, you know, it's like, what do I wear as a bathing suit? And, you know, people, and I was confused, and it's weird, but it's like, it's a beautiful day, and I want to honor this planet. I want to enter the ocean. I want to, this is upright activity, you know? But so it's that owning that vulnerability, owning that I'm not in control, owning that I feel kind of sad, that to not fall into, oh, and that's a bad thing, but rather that's an opening, just like Tomas, if he's still here, that opening, it's so connecting. Like I want to use my pain to connect. So, and that feels like disrupting the status quo of my mind, of constantly separating the world into, this is good, this is bad, this feels good, this feels bad. I feel comfortable here, I feel uncomfortable here. You know, to just power through that and just stay with the process of vulnerability, which is ultimately, I think, the process of solidarity, which is what we so desperately need right now. Because if anybody's holding out here on the screen right now, thinking that Black Lives Matter is not meaning your life matters, if you don't think that we're not talking about your life when we say Black Lives Matter, you know, I want to just challenge that. I want to challenge any of us who still feels that, to dive more deeply into our own vulnerability, to find a way to do that through our own practice. And again, you know, it's kind of easy. It's easy. We do it. We root, we ground through the bottom part of our body, and we open through the top part of our body. What could be more perfect for the work of justice? Grounding and opening. I'm right here, and I don't know, but I'm right here. I'm right here, and I don't really know. These are so helpful, these two qualities for justice work. People ask me, they say, and you know, Sarah, Charlie, and Jishu, I'm sure you've gotten this too, like, oh, I feel so calm and peaceful in the Zendo. Maybe you're not feeling that right now with this talk, with this Q&A, which I hope you're not. But I hope a part of you is still connected with that calm and that peace, because it's right there too. But people say, oh, I feel so peaceful in the Zendo. How can I carry that out into the world? Well, what's stopping you? You know, do you notice that the peace is right there? You know, like, what are you expecting? But there is something in there, I think, about how do we make that subtle shift from what's happening on the cushion, which I'm proposing to you is justice work, to what happens, just like Kuan Yin, when you take that first step to stand up. How can we see the continuum of the work that we're doing on the cushion? Sarah, I have no idea if that responded to your inquiry. Thank you. You're so gracious. You're also gracious, and I know we're out of time, but I just want to give one more moment, if it's okay, for anybody who has a major problem with what I've been saying. If there's anybody who's like really upset, really angry, I would really love to hear from you. You know, are you in opposition to what I said? Does this feel like not the true Dharma? Please speak.
Joan, thank you. Everything you said feels so genuine and so extremely helpful. So I just want to end with that, because I don't think anybody in the Sangha is feeling otherwise. At least I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Well, if you are, please speak and let this be an ongoing inquiry, because that is our practice. Nothing's off limits.
I was going to say that with all of this, I just feel overwhelmed and I kind of don't know where to start. And it's really depressing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So that's Holly. Thank you very much for speaking. Yeah. So then back to the tidiness of our practice, which does come in handy. I didn't mean to disparage it by calling, Buddhism as a practice as opposed to a philosophy as still kind of tidy. It comes in handy. I keep this space very tidy because I feel so much. And Holly, sometimes, most of the time, what I do feel is overwhelm. Absolutely. So what is the practice of overwhelm? Right here, it looks like you might have a Raksu. So both of you. So yes. So maybe you're a long-time practitioner. And I'm still going to say, for me, the practice of overwhelm is I sit down, I ground, and I open. And I say, all right, overwhelm is happening. What else is going on? I don't want to, as Darlene Cohen used to say, I'm not going to let it be the bully in the room. What else is happening? Working with my mind here. Can I open up a field where there's plenty of room for overwhelm and something else, like maybe determination? Let me just share that when we were talking to the mayor, and Pamela, maybe you want to ask something, and let me give you a chance. Let me just say this one thought. When we were speaking to the mayor, Esther was telling the mayor what the scene in Nairobi when the armed militia came out with their guns, and Mayor Cahill said, Joan, how are you able to meditate with Esther yelling, doing all that yelling? And I said, well, Mayor Cahill, I was yelling too. And then after a while, it was just so nice to be able to sit down and be quiet. We have this available to us. Let's use it. What is the practice of returning to the cushion for us? I mean, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed. Holly, I'm not sure that helps, but I do want to acknowledge Pamela. Pamela, did you want to say something?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Yeah, as usual, I'm having technical difficulties, so I switched to my phone. That's why I couldn't reply earlier on. But I did want to say regarding your very beginning of your talk, when you were talking about loneliness and aloneness,
Yes.
and then I've heard the term overwhelm.
Yes.
And that's been pretty much my experience for this entire year. My husband, unfortunately, died unexpectedly in January. And then before I'd actually wrapped my mind around that, I was still kind of in denial, like you are in early widowhood and grief, that, you just keep thinking that this person is just away and they're going to come back. And the hospice people told me that was true. And then we went into lockdown. And so here I am with an adult child, but my no husband of 41 years. And so I definitely experienced a lot of aloneness and got in touch with, once again, my own suffering. And when I was in seminary, we had lots of conversations around suffering and grief. And in particular, I had forgotten about this, but racism. And so I'm kind of switching gears here because I know you guys were trying to wrap it up, but one of the teachers I had early on was an ordained Presbyterian minister with a PhD in church history, James Noel, and he was Black. And all he, we talked about church history, but he was really into talking about, white privilege. And in the very beginning, I really had issues with him when I first started seminary. And then my second semester with him, he became my most favorite teacher of anyone, because I really started to grok what he was talking about racism, and understand where I fit into that. And you were talking earlier about just shifting your focus just a little bit from straightforward to another angle. And it really, really helped begin to open the door for me to see other people and their experience in their life journey, and how they view me as well as their self, and in this day and time. And that was even, I graduated in 2016, so this was anywhere from 2012 to 2016. So yes, 9/11 had happened, but we hadn't had what we have today with the George Floyd and all the protests and everything. So there was lots of topics that you brought up today. And like I said, I just kind of skipped around, and it's a little bit higgledy-piggledy here in my conversation. But I just want to say thank you. You've given me lots of food for thought, and the aloneness is still there, and it is what it is. So thank you.
Pamela, thank you so much for breaking through. I love that phrase, higgledy-piggledy. I don't know if I pronounced it right.
Yep.
So I think what you touched on is really important about connecting our own woundedness, our own grief.
Right.
The grief of the world. It's precious, it's priceless, and it's our way. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you so much, Joan. Sorry, no, you had no takers on the opposition.
Keep me posted.
and yet we can keep the conversation alive. So if you look in the chat, there's the 4 great bodhisattva vows. We'll do those together. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Joan.